Hello everyone. In this video we are going to revise registration. See, when we talk about registration, our basic focus will be on three main sections and then we will move forward. The first section is section 22. Section 22 talks about persons who are liable to register. Now, who is a person who is liable to register? The first one is a person whose aggregate turnover in a financial year. Careful, it does not use the word preceding financial year. Preceding financial year is used for checking exemption in certain special cases in exemption, but not here. Here the law says aggregate turnover in a financial year exceeds registration limit. Now, what is the registration limit set? We learned this in the introductory video. For only goods, it would be 10, 20, 40. 10 lakh is applicable for Manipur, Tripura, Nagaland, Mizoram. 20 lakh is applicable for Mast UP, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Telangana, Uttarakhand and Pondicherry. Last, 40 lakh is applicable for all other states. But if you are dealing with only services or goods plus services, then the registration limit will be 20 and 10. 20 for all states, 10 for Manipur, Tripura, Nagaland, Mizoram. Okay. Then the second person who is liable to register is person who was registered under the earlier law. If a person was registered under the earlier law, in that case, even in the current law, that is GST, he has to register. So if a person was registered under service tax, excise, VAT, then he had to register under GST as well. The third person being transferee in amalgamation, merger, demerger, the new entity will have to register. And last one is transferee in succession. See, succession can cover death of a sole proprietor or it could also cover transfer of business. So in that case, the new person succeeds the business. In such cases, the transferee has to register mandatorily if the transferor was registered. Obviously, if the transferor was not registered, then transferee will not be required to register. So these are the persons who are liable to register. Be careful about the term aggregate turnover. See, when we talk about aggregate turnover includes taxable supplies, exempt supplies, interstate supplies and export of goods or services. But what does it exclude? It excludes GST. It also excludes inward supply under RCM. Tell me one thing, can my purchases, even though I am paying the tax under reverse charge, can it become part of aggregate turnover, that is my outward supply? The answer is no. And remember one thing, aggregate turnover is calculated pan-wise. When I say pan-wise, all the branches throughout India under the same pan would be added together to calculate aggregate turnover. Yes? Okay. Here a question arises. Say suppose I have one branch in a 10 lakh limit state, one branch in a 20 lakh limit state, one branch in a 40 lakh limit state. I'll take an example. One branch is in Manipur, one branch is in Telangana, one branch is in Mumbai. And from all the three branches, I am making taxable supplies and I am only supplying goods. Only supplying goods, I have three branches, Manipur, Telangana, Mumbai. Now the question which arises is, what would be my registration limit? Because aggregate turnover is to be calculated on a all India basis. So what should be the aggregate turnover? limit for registration in such cases. Listen to me very carefully. If all the three branches are making taxable supplies, then registration limit will be 10 lakh. If all the three branches are making taxable supplies, okay. If these two are making taxable supply, while Manipur I am making only exempt supply, then 20 lakh will be considered. If I am making taxable supply only from Mumbai, then 40 lakh limit would be considered. So remember one thing, whichever is lower is considered, but only in cases where you are making taxable supplies from that branch in Manipur. If you are not making taxable supplies from there, then you can ignore that registration limit and you will consider the other limits. Be very careful about this particular point. This was about section 22. Then we come to section 24. Section 24 provides for compulsory registration. What does this mean? This means that even if your turnover does not exceed registration limit, still you are required to register. So even if my turnover is 5 lakh, 6 lakh, 7 lakh, still I am required to register. Now the question is, who all are mentioned in this section 24? Let's see. First one is a person who is making an interstate taxable supply of goods. See, interstate taxable supply of goods, services is covered by section 23 exception, and that's why who is required to register mandatorily? Only a person who is making interstate taxable supply of goods. Only such person is required to register mandatorily. Sir, if I am providing services interstate, then you can check the registration limit. You will not be covered under section 24. Okay. Second person is a person liable to pay tax under RCM. When I say liable to pay under RCM, what do I mean? When I say liable to pay under RCM, is it from the angle of the supplier or from the angle of the recipient? When I say liable to pay, obviously it is from the angle of the recipient. So that means if I am a person liable to pay under RCM, I have to register mandatorily. I don't have an option not to register. Clear? So GPA to factory, insurance agent to insurance company, director to body corporate, recovery agent to banks and financial institutions, those who are mentioned in recipient column, they have to register because they are the persons liable to pay tax under RCM. The third one is a person supplying through e-commerce operator who is required to collect tax. See, TCS, that is required to collect tax, is not there in your syllabus, but a person who is supplying through e-commerce operator required to collect tax is required to register. This you will have to read. So, are we talking about Flipkart in this case or seller on Flipkart? We are talking about the seller on Flipkart. So, seller on Flipkart has to register mandatorily. Then we have an e-commerce operator who is required to pay tax under 9(5). Who are these e-commerce operators required to pay tax under 9(5)? Transportation of passengers, that is Ola, Uber. Then Make My Trip, Go Ibibo, Oyo, where the hotel is unregistered, or housekeeping services, where the supplier of service is unregistered. So in such cases, is ECO required to register mandatorily? The answer is yes. ECO is required to register mandatory. Then you have an agent covered by Schedule 1. Remember Schedule 1? Principal and agent transaction where agent is billing in his name. Those agents who bill in their own name, they will be covered under this provision. Okay. CTP or NRTP. See, this discussion will come in this video itself. Casual taxable person, non-resident taxable person. Both of these are required to register mandatory. And the last one is something which you study at CA final, TDS, TCS, ISD, OIDAR. These are not there for your exams. A person who is required to deduct tax, a person who is required to collect tax, a person who is an input service distributor, and OIDAR service provider. In these cases, registration is required mandatory, but you will not come across this in internship. Now, another important discussion is section 23. Persons not liable to register. That means government is giving a relief to certain sectors that these persons are not required to register. Now, who are those persons? First one is a person who is engaged in supply of only exempt goods or exempt services. So, if you are only supplying exempt goods or exempt services, then you are not required to register. Makes sense as well. Tell me one thing, if a person is only supplying exempt goods or services, what will be his output tax? His output tax would be 0. What would be his input tax? That would again be 0. What would be he do taking registration? Nothing. That's the reason. A person who is only supplying exempt goods or service is not required to register. For instance, take a example of a doctor providing only healthcare service which is exempt. So, say suppose his turnover is 70 lakh, 2 crore. Is he required to register? Because he is only providing exempted goods or service. Okay. The second point is where you are only engaged in supply of goods or services covered under RCM. You are supplying goods or services which is covered under RCM. Think and tell me, if I am supplying something which is covered under RCM, what will I do taking registration? Because anyways, I am not required to discharge even a single rupee of tax. For example, insurance agent to insurance company. When I know insurance company is going to pay the tax, what will insurance agent do taking registration? That's why if a person is engaged in supply of only those goods or services which are covered under RCM, supplier. Here we are talking from the angle of the supplier. Here we were talking from the angle of the recipient. Okay. Third one is agriculturist. Yes. Agriculturist to the extent of cultivation of land, produce from cultivation of land will not be liable to register. Here, the term agriculturist covers individual and HUF. These two are covered in this agriculturist. Hey, did you understand this? How? Fourth one is a person who is supplying services through e-commerce operator up to 20 lakh 10 lakh. Person supplying services through e-commerce operator up to 20 lakh 10 lakh. Even in this case, registration is not required up to 20 lakh 10 lakh. Now, there is a clash. Here you see services through e-commerce operator not liable to register. Here you say through e-commerce operator compulsory registration. Now the question is which is right? Now let's try to reconcile all this. See this carefully. If I am supplying through e-commerce operator and I am supplying goods, and which e-commerce operator? Who is required to collect tax. If I am supplying through e-commerce operator goods, mandatory registration. Correct. But if I am supplying services through e-commerce operator, registration will be required only if the limit of 10 lakh, 20 lakh is exceeded. Understood? So careful whether you are supplying goods through e-commerce operator or services through e-commerce operator. And the last one in this is interstate supply of handicraft goods up to 20 lakh, 10 lakh. Interstate supply of handicraft goods up to 20 lakh, 10 lakh. Now, see this carefully. Let's try to understand what happens in interstate. Now, say if I am supplying services interstate, is mandatory registration required? No, sir. If you are supplying services interstate, then 10 lakh, 20 lakh has to be checked. If I am supplying goods interstate, now then check whether it is handicraft. If it is handicraft goods, then in that case 10 lakh, 20 lakh. But if it is others, then in that case mandatory registration. Did you understand this? Yes. Be very careful about this particular part. Interstate, check whether you are supplying services, whether you are supplying handicraft goods or anything else. If it is anything else interstate, then you have to register mandatorily. But if it is services through services interstate or handicraft goods interstate, then check 10 lakh, 20 lakh limit. Clear? Okay. So we have discussed three provisions. One, Section 22, persons liable to register. Section 24, compulsory registration. Section 23, persons who are not liable to register. Now, two important points before we move forward. If a person is supplying pan masala, tobacco, ice cream, in that case, he will not get the registration limit of 40 lakh. Yes. So 40 lakh limit will not be available. Now, if 40 lakh limit is not available, then the question is what limit will apply for a supplier of pan masala, tobacco, ice cream? In such cases, 20 and 10 will be applicable. And you understand 20 and 10 wherever I use. 20 is applicable for all states. 10 is applicable for Manipur, Tripura, Nagaland. Okay. The next point and a very important point is interest earned on loans, deposits and advances will form part of aggregate turnover. But if you are earning interest, you will still be eligible for 40 lakh limit if other supplies are only goods. Again, see this carefully. Say suppose a person is into sale of AC, 32 lakh, and he earns interest, 1 lakh. Tell me one thing, 32 lakh is supply of goods, correct? 1 lakh is interest, which is an exempt service. You remember, this is a service. So, will the person be considered as supplier of goods plus service or only goods? The law has said he will be considered as a supplier of only goods. So remember that the benefit of 40 lakh will be available even if you are just earning interest. Just earning interest doesn't mean you lose the benefit of 40 lakh. But tell me one thing. If this person along with sale of AC does repair of AC also, will he get this benefit? The answer is no. Hey, then repair of service is a separate service, then goods plus service, then you get 20 lakh limit. Hey, did you understand this? So a person only earning interest will not be considered as a supplier of service just because he is earning interest. Clear? Now, here one important thing which you should distinguish. Under composition scheme, interest is not at all considered as part of aggregate turnover. Under registration limit, it is considered as part of aggregate turnover, but a person would not lose the status of exclusively dealing in goods just because he is earning interest. Remember, composition scheme, when you are checking 1.5 crore limit, will you consider interest? No. But for registration limit, will you consider interest? Yes. Here the benefit is separate. This benefit is that you will still be regarded as supplier of only goods. Okay. This was about section 22, 23 and 24. Now we move on to section 25. What is 25? Procedure for registration. Good amount of changes have taken place in this. Let's understand those changes carefully. First of all, we know one thing, that a person who is liable to register has to apply within 30 days from the date when he was liable to register. But my question to you is, say suppose he applies within 30 days. What is the effective date? And if he applies after 30 days, what is the effective date of registration? Now, if he applies within 30 days, then in that case, the effective date of registration would be date when he was liable to register. But if he applies after 30 days, then the effective date will be date of grant of registration. The day he gets registration, that would be the effective date. We had seen this in ITC as well, that it matters a lot whether effective date is liable date or grant of registration date. Correct? Okay. Now, distinct persons, we understand that branches which are required to register separately or they are registered separately are regarded as distinct persons. Plus, can a person take voluntary registration as well? The answer is yes, a person can take voluntary registration. SEZ unit or developer has to be registered separately even if there is a separate registration within a state. UN or embassy get a unique identification number, basically for claiming refund of tax paid on purchases. And lastly, officer has a power. He can grant suo motu registration to a person who was liable to register but he is unregistered. This is normally exercised in case of frauds, where we'll first make him register, then make him submit all the documents and then start the recovery proceedings. Okay. The next discussion is how do we get registration? There have been some changes. See, the first thing which is there is you have to fill in PAN, email ID, mobile number. All these details are required to be filled. This is called as part A of the registration. You will enter the OTP. You will thereafter submit. Once you submit this, you get a TRN, temporary reference number. Then you move on to part B. Part B, you have to fill the specified details, name, address, photograph, rental agreement, the nature of business, what are the goods or services which you are going to deal with. All this has to be incorporated. This is part B. Now, when you finish filling details, now the new thing which has come is Aadhaar authentication. Now, if a person authenticates Aadhaar, sir, what is the meaning of authenticating Aadhaar? A hyperlink will be received on the email and mobile number. You'll have to click on that, enter your Aadhaar number, OTP will come, OTP has to be entered and Aadhaar is authenticated. A verification of the identity of the person. That's basically Aadhaar authentication. So Aadhaar authentication, if you have selected and you have successfully completed it, in that case, application is forwarded to proper officer. Sir, if I don't authenticate Aadhaar, if I don't do Aadhaar authentication, then also application is forwarded. Or if I fail to do Aadhaar authentication within 15 days, I took Aadhaar authentication but I did not complete it within 15 days, still application will be forwarded. But sir, then what is the point of authenticating Aadhaar? Now comes the catch. See this carefully. Here, once application is forwarded in this case, in case 1, officer will have 7 working days time to process the application. If he does not take any action within 7 working days, then it would be a case of deemed registration. But if you don't authenticate Aadhaar, then 1, officer will have the power to carry out physical verification, plus the deemed registration will happen only after 30 days. That means officer will get more time. Your registration certificate will be delayed. So that means here officer gets more time because he is going to physically verify the premise, plus he is going to go through the documents to the best of his judgment. And that's why here the time limit allotted to him is much higher. Sir, if I do Aadhaar authentication, does it guarantee that never ever will 30 days apply? No. There is one more exception. If the officer feels that physical verification is necessary for this person, in that case, again, it would be 30 days. So, to conclude, there are 3 cases where officer would get 30 days time. Put it in your brain. 1. If I don't authenticate Aadhaar. 2nd, if I take Aadhaar authentication but don't complete it within 15 days. 3rd, if officer with the approval of assistant commissioner or deputy commissioner feels that physical verification is necessary in this case. In these 3 cases, officer will get 30 days time. But if you authenticate Aadhaar and officer does not feel the necessity of physical verification, then it will be 7 working days. Did you understand this? Yes? Okay. Once application is forwarded, satisfied, not satisfied. If officer is satisfied, he will give the registration. If he is not satisfied, he will issue a notice. And the person has to reply within 7 working days. And once he replies, thereafter again, satisfied, not satisfied. If he is satisfied, then grant of registration. Not satisfied, application is rejected. Sir, here also some deemed thing was there after I replied. Yes, even today this is 7 working days. People, please understand that the change has happened only in this Aadhaar authentication thing, and where he feels that physical verification is necessary before grant of registration. Only in these 2 cases, 30 days time is applicable in the first level. After he has issued a notice and we have replied, even today deemed registration is based on 7 working days. Clear with this? Be very careful about this particular aspect. Now, when we take the discussion forward, you need to be very careful about one thing. There are some persons who are not required to authenticate Aadhaar. In that case, Aadhaar authentication provision itself will not apply on them. Who are those persons, sir? Just think over it. If a person is not a citizen of India, does it make sense to make him do Aadhaar authentication? No. Government department, local authority, statutory body, public sector undertaking, UN or embassy. So these are the persons who would not require Aadhaar authentication. That means for them directly 7 working days will be applicable if the officer does not feel the necessity of physical verification. But wherever officer feels or deems it fit that physical verification should be done, in that case 30 days limit will apply. Sir, can the officer do a physical verification after grant of registration? The answer is yes. That power is anyways there from the beginning of the law. Even today that continues. Now the power is enhanced. See, this was 3 working days. Then it got changed to 7 working days. Now 7 working days is there, but there is an exception also that in some cases 30 working days will apply. To sum up, you remember those 3 cases where 30 days will be applicable? 1. Any case where Aadhaar authentication is not completed. Second, where you don't opt for Aadhaar authentication. Third, where officer deems it fit with the approval of Assistant Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner that Aadhaar authentication is required. So this is the entire process of section 25, and the moment you complete this entire process of section 25, you are going to get a GSTIN. Hey, what is this GSTIN? GST identification number. The 15-digit PAN-based alphanumeric code. First 2 digits represent state code, next 10 digits PAN, and then you have 13, 14 and 15. Oh. Now, one other important aspect is any case of new registration will have to undergo this entire process. But what if I apply within 30 days but I get my registration after 30 days? Remember, what has to be checked is when have you applied. Remember this. It's a very important point. Okay. Now let's move towards section 27. Now what does section 27 deal with? See, 26 is basically deemed registration, that if you have taken registration under CGST Act, then it is deemed that you are registered under SGST Act, and vice versa is also true. Section 27 deals with casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person. Who is a CTP? A person who does business occasionally in a state where he does not have a fixed place of business. So say suppose I am registered in Karnataka and I go for an exhibition in Mumbai and sell the products there. Sell, not just to show. Sell the products there. I don't have a place of business in Mumbai. So in Mumbai, when I am making those sales in the exhibition, I am regarded as a casual taxable person. Apply the same thing for a person who is coming from outside India and selling in India. That person does not have a fixed place of business or residence in India, and that's why it would be regarded as a non-resident taxable person. 5 key points which you should remember for CTP or NRTP. 1. They have to pay taxes in advance. Yes. Sir, how will they pay in advance? Estimate basis. Sir, gross or net? A gross means output, or net output minus ITC. CBIC has clarified that net tax payable estimated has to be paid. Okay. Second, they have to apply for registration 5 days prior to the grant of registration. If you want to commence your business today, at least 5 days prior, you have to apply for registration. Third one, you cannot commence business until and unless you have registration certificate with you. Fourth, validity of registration is 90 days or days mentioned in application, whichever is earlier. Obviously, if you want registration for only 5 days, can you take registration only for 5 days? The answer is yes, but maximum 90 days. Plus, is an extension allowed? Yes, one extension is allowed for additional 90 days. So, these are the 5 key points. Sir, can I take additional extension beyond this 180 days? CBIC has clarified that even in case of long running exhibition, never can it exceed 180 days. So, is it permitted to take registration beyond 180 days? The answer is no. Okay. Then we have a discussion with regard to section 28, which is amendment to registration. Fairly simple topic. See, if it's a non-core area. Sir, what is a non-core area? Any area other than core. That means you have to know what is core area. 3. Name, address, details of partners, directors, karta, trustee, etc. These are considered as core area. Sir, what's the difference? See, non-core area, in both the cases you have to apply within 15 days. Non-core area, the moment you file the application, it is approved. Yes. You filed an application today, it is approved. Core area. You file an application, it is forwarded to proper officer, then again that satisfied, not satisfied, notice, reply, satisfied, not satisfied, entire process continues. Sir, is there a concept of deemed amendment? The answer is yes. In the first leg it would be 15 working days and in the second leg it would be 7 working days. So in registration both were 7 and in one case first one was 30, but in amendment it is 15 working days if officer does not take any action, deemed, and second it is 7 working days. Clear? Remember one thing, if there is a change in PAN, in that case you will have to take a fresh registration. Okay. The last discussion would be section 29 and section 30. First, let's talk about section 29. Cancellation of registration. See, what can be the cases where I apply for cancellation, or can officer also cancel the registration in certain cases? The answer is yes. Cancellation where registered person applies. See, he can apply in 3 cases. 1. Discontinuance of business. Close down. 2nd. Change in constitution of business. Sole proprietor becoming a partnership firm becoming a corporate, body corporate becoming a partnership firm. All these cases of change in constitution, where normally it would result into change in PAN. And the last one is a person who is now no longer required to register under section 22 or 23. No longer required to register. Now, say suppose earlier I was supplying outside the state. That means compulsory registration. But now I have stopped supplying outside the state. So I am now no longer required to register. I can apply for cancellation. Or my turnover has fallen down drastically. I can apply for cancellation. Can officer also cancel my registration? The answer is yes. Suo motu officer can cancel the registration. But obviously, he will issue a show cause notice and then cancel it. See, first one is certain contraventions. I will come to this in a while. Second one is not filed return for 6 months. And for composition dealer, this will be 3 quarters. Third, I took voluntary registration but did not commence business for 6 months. And last one, registration was taken by fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of tax. So one is list of contraventions. Second, not filed returns for 6 months. Third, voluntary registration taken but did not commence business. And last one, taken registration by fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of facts. That is giving wrong information. I took registration. Now what is there in contraventions? First, where I am supplying goods without invoice. You understand goods or services without invoice? Yes. Second, I am carrying on business from a place other than registered place. I am sure you understand. Why will you carry on business from a place other than registered place? Sir, again a case of tax evasion. Third, section 16 violated. Now what is the section 16? Conditions for taking ITC. If you have violated that, even in that case, officer can cancel it. Fourth, mismatch between GSTR1 data and GSTR3B data. If there is a mismatch, officer can cancel it. Fifth, new rule added, Rule 86B. This Rule 86B we will take up in returns chapter. We will see there what is the rule saying. And then, say suppose you have not furnished your bank details. Then in that case, you will be covered under this contravention, and in that case, the registration would be cancelled. Now, what is the time limit? Here, I apply within 30 days and then officer has to pass an order within 30 days. If he wants to reject it, then he has to first give me a notice. I will reply. Then within 30 days, he has to pass a decision. In suo motu, will he cancel directly? No. First, he will issue a notice. Then, I will have to reply. Then, he can pass an order. Now, see, cancellation process will take time. What about the time between the cancellation process? In that case, the time between the cancellation process, the registration would be suspended. Now, what is the meaning of the term suspended? Listen to me very carefully. The significance of suspended is you cannot make a taxable supply. That means you cannot collect tax from your customers. Second, you are not required to file GST returns. So remember, any case of suspension of registration, there are two implications. One, I cannot make a taxable supply. That means I cannot collect tax from customer. And second one is I am not required to file GST returns. Now, say suppose I myself apply for cancellation, then suspension will be effective from the date when I apply for cancellation or the date from when I seek cancellation. See, I can seek cancellation from a future date as well. Whichever is later, from there my registration would be suspended. Suo motu, the moment officer issues a notice, registration would be suspended if he feels so. Now, this was already there in the law. Now, a new power is given to the officer. This new power is again suspension power, where the officer can suspend the registration if he finds significant mismatch between GST returns filed or any other analysis. Hey, this is very wide. First of all, this term significant is not defined. So, if the officer finds significant mismatch between the GST returns or any other analysis, then he can suspend the registration, giving 30 days time to reply. This is dangerous because if my registration is suspended, I will not be able to make a taxable supply. Did you understand this? Okay. And remember one thing, whenever it is a case of suspension, it would at the end lead to cancellation unless officer is satisfied that there is no reason to cancel. Every cancellation will result into reversal of ITC. Yes. And reversal of ITC of based on the stock which is available. See, reversal of ITC will happen for inputs and capital goods. For inputs, it would be full ITC taken. For capital goods, it would be proportionate to remaining life of capital goods. Now, these two things you have already seen. Full ITC taken and proportionate to remaining life of capital goods. Total life of capital goods is 60 months. Here, in case of cancellation, one more thing is added, or tax on transaction value, whichever is higher. So, government wants to compare the tax on transaction value, and then whatever is higher, that's the reversal which government is seeking. Here also, proportionate to remaining life or tax on transaction value, whichever is higher. The government is seeking a higher reversal in these cases. Understood? Okay. The last discussion in this would be section 30, that is revocation of cancellation. Yes, I can apply for revocation of cancellation. I can request the officer, obviously only in case of suo motu cancellation by them. I can seek for revocation of my cancellation. The time limit to apply is within 30 days from the date of receipt of order of cancellation plus new amendment, 2 more 30 days is added. That means 2 more extension of 30 days is allowed. One is by additional commissioner, joint commissioner, and the second one is by commissioner. So, additional commissioner or joint commissioner can extend it for other 30 days if there is a sufficient cause beyond delay. Commissioner can further extend it by another 30 days. So, can I say now for applying for revocation, I totally have 90 days time? Exactly right. So, this is a important amendment, and once you apply for revocation, if he is satisfied, he has to pass an order within 30 days. If he is not satisfied, then he will issue a notice. We will reply within 7 days, and thereafter again he has to pass an order within 30 days. Okay, there is no concept of deemed cancellation or deemed revocation of cancellation. Clear? See you all in the next video.